Okay, Taz, I have to tell you about this hilarious situation that happened to me this week, which I hope you find funny, but also I might
Okay.
just be being like seriously immature as per usual. But basically, I am now teaching pole, and as part of like teaching pole, I've had to go on a first aid course this week. And can I just say, why the has nobody on this goddamn earth told me how awkward first aid courses are? Have you ever done one?
No, I don't think I ever have.
They're actually horrific. Okay, so basically, like you obviously learn things like CPR, what to do if someone's choking, how to like bandage someone up, all this random stuff. And obviously, as part of your assessment, you do like a theory assessment, you also do a practical assessment. So, yeah, as part of the practical assessment, you have to like pair up with someone and then like you go through whatever you've learned. So, like maybe you have to pretend to give them CPR, you have to put them in the recovery position. Anyway, I was with this guy called James, and to be fair, he was probably fed up with me because I'm the type of person where like I have to do things like 10 times. Like I'm not just doing it once. Like if I'm learning how to put someone in the recovery position, like I'm doing it 10 times to make sure that it's in my brain. So we get to the choking part. And can I just say, like, the choking part was the most awkward thing ever, because first of all you have to act, so like you have to stand there and pretend that you're choking, so you're there like which is
Okay.
just so embarrassing. It's so
I
embarrassing.
can't picture
But
you
anyway,
doing that at all. I'm so sorry, but I
oh,
can't.
I was actually having fun with it because me and this James guy, like,
Oh,
we were vibing. It was funny. Like, we were just having a laugh with it because you've got to, because it's just like, it's just awkward, isn't it? But yeah, so like in the theory bit, when we're like learning about what to do with choking, this is so fucking immature of me. But basically, you know, like when you like whack someone on the back when they're choking to like try and get it out of them, yeah?
yeah.
Why do like they actually call that back blows?
Oh my God. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, so they'd be like, oh, you have to give them like 5 back blows. And then, you know, when you go behind them and you put your hands around their stomach and you like, 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 do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're called abdominal thrusts. So basically, they'd be like, okay, so if someone's choking, you have to give them 5 back blows and then like 5 abdominal thrusts. And it was just so awkward because there's me and this guy who I've literally not met until like this morning. And then the woman, Helen's like, okay, James, now you have to give Liv 5 back blows and 5 abdominal thrusts. And then he's coming behind me and he actually has to like do it or like act it out. But the worst part was that he was like narrating it the whole time. So like instead of just doing it, when he like came behind me to do the like thrust, he was like, oh, sorry, like, do you mind? And I was just thinking, can you stop narrating this? Just fucking do it. Like, stop saying sorry. Stop asking if I mind. But it was just the most awkward thing ever. But having said that, we did talk a lot about the podcast, and I think he definitely did listen to the podcast, and maybe he's listening now. I don't know, but
Hi, James.
hi. Thanks for, saving my fictional
Saving your
choking
life.
scenario with some back blows. I'm
And
just so
abdominal
immature.
thrust.
But it was just so awkward. Like, why are they called back blows? I don't know. And I just can't stop thinking about it. Like, why are we naming it this?
To be honest, for me, it's the abdominal thrusts. Like, that's,
Really?
to me, it's more of an innuendo, yeah.
It was just horrific because other people were like older as well. And then like when he left the room, one of them goes to me, oh, like he's so smitten with you or something like that. You know, like classical like old people being old people, where there's like two
Yeah.
young people who are interacting and then the old people in the room just like totally overread the situation.
Yeah. I mean, how
Oh,
could
it
they,
was
though?
just
He was giving you back blows and abdominal thrusts, so.
oh, it's fucking hilarious. So funny. I mean, you're probably listening and you're like, Liv, that's such a story. But it was a really like be there moment because like I can't stop thinking about like how awkward it was ever since. Oh,
Surely loads of people have done first aid courses and know how it goes down.
yeah. And if they have, then like they can imagine how awkward it would be if you're paired up with a guy that you've never met before who's like around your age and you didn't know what you was getting yourself in for.
Well, I guess all our listeners can take this as their warning for like the first aid course. Is like, if you're
This is your
single,
warning.
maybe like pair up with a hot guy, and if you're in a relationship, maybe just pair up with Barbara.
I mean, he did ask for my Instagram after. Which made it even more awkward.
Oh, I'm not surprised after all those back blows.
Anyway, can we get into today's episode now?
Yeah, let's get into today's episode. We're going to be talking all about microchips in vaccines. So let's get into it.
Let's get into it.
This is Debunked by the So Culture podcast.
Hosted by Liv and Taz, two girls exploring the world of science and tech, unfiltered.
This season, we're separating fact from fiction as we dive into the world's most controversial conspiracy theories by seeing if science can prove or disprove them.
And of course, we are still serving up the laboraTEAAA
Because the STEM world is messier than you think.
Don't forget, all opinions are our own, and all of our listener stories are alleged. Let's get into this week's episode of Debunked.
The year is 2047 and the world is no longer free. The moment the first vaccines rolled out, they weren't just medicine, they were the beginning of control. Microchips hidden within each dose, pulsed beneath the skin of every citizen, linking them to an omnipresent surveillance grid. The powerful elite, shadowed in secrecy, monitored every step, every breath, every thought, ensuring obedience through a vast 5G network designed to manipulate emotions and suppress resistance. Defiance was met with silent reprogramming. But in a world where free will had become an illusion, whispers of new world order were dangerous, and those who dared to question the system simply disappeared. This is the future we're headed towards, and it all started with those pesky microchips in coronavirus vaccines.
Oh my gosh, that is a scary thought. And, you know, I giggled a little bit during that intro, but do you know what? For some people, this is a genuine, real fear. So I'm excited for this episode because I feel like we need to talk about this whole topic because, like I say, there's definitely people who, I mean, this whole point of the series is to debunk the conspiracy theories. But I mean, first, I just want to know, like, why would microchips ever be put into vaccines? Like, what would the motive be for that?
Yeah, exactly. Also, to be completely transparent and for the sake of a bit of fun, because in my eyes, it's quite a serious conspiracy theory. Anything around vaccines and specifically the COVID vaccine, quite serious. So we're just entertaining it for a bit of fun before then potentially debunking it. But yeah, just wanted to put a disclaimer in here first that we're not being serious about this, so no one come for us. But the conspiracy theory is the theory that there are microchips in the coronavirus vaccine. So the vaccine you had, Liv, the vaccine I had, anyone who's had a coronavirus vaccine, apparently now we have microchips in us. And why is this? Why would there be a motive behind putting microchips in anyone who's got a vaccine? Well, most people think it's about control. The government wants to know our every move. So that apparently is a good enough motive in itself. And it all originated in March 2020. Bill Gates posted on Reddit himself, encouraging people to ask him anything about coronavirus, anything about vaccines, things like that. And on there, and I'll link it below, in response to someone's question, he said, eventually, we'll have some digital certificates to show who has recovered or been tested recently, or when we have a vaccine, who has received it. Now, what's fishy and what people immediately responded with was that this coincided with Microsoft's partnership with ID 2020, which is a digital ID in the form of a microchip, with the idea of monitoring health and providing a solution to the global identity problem where basically people in poverty tend not to have government forms of ID and therefore no access to healthcare and work, which was obviously a major problem in the pandemic. So some users of the Reddit forum had swore they saw it advertised as an implantable chip, but no evidence of this has actually been found. But in a time where COVID-19 was rife and vaccines were being developed, surely the microchips could be in the vaccines. And not long after, the head of the Russian Communist Party said that so-called globalists supported a covert mass chip implantation, which they may in time resort to under the pretext of a mandatory vaccination against coronavirus. And not only this, but the Gates Foundation also financially supported the development of biocompatible quantum dots, essentially a quantum dot tattoo, invisible by the naked eye, but visible through a special light. And this study also proved that it was possible to co-deliver this quantum dot tattoo with a vaccine, and the pattern of the particles on the skin could serve as an on-person vaccination record, which is shown to last around 9 months on rats. And a Swedish website that advocates for biohacking and implantable microchips unearthed all of this and posted their evidence online, titled "Bill Gates Will Use Microchip Implants to Fight Coronavirus."
Oh my God, that is crazy. I've never heard about these quantum dots before. Like, how have I never heard about these? That's literally so interesting. So it kind of makes me a little bit interested in like how the theory actually spread and became like mainstream, I guess. Because it sounds like there's actually some like important information related to this theory that people don't really know about, like the quantum dots. So yeah, how did the theory spread?
Yeah, because this is obviously the seed that's been planted, right? And we know from a lot of our conspiracy theories, it takes like one seed and then it just kind of fires off in like loads of different directions. But this was kind of blown out of proportion, and we know that social media is a really powerful thing. But 2 days after the Swedish website posted this article about Bill Gates and fighting coronavirus, Adam Fannin, a Baptist pastor from Florida, stumbled upon this article, and it resonated with his deep distrust of Gates, and he decided to run with it. So this pastor believed that Gates, through his business and philanthropy, is trying to depopulate the planet. That's his theory. But the pastor titled his post, "Bill Gates, Microchip Vaccine Implants to Fight Coronavirus," adding one pivotal word to the biohacker's title: vaccine. And this video quickly got 1.6 million views, where this idea then spread across social media and was even shared by pop culture icons such as MIA and Kanye West.
Of course, it was Kanye West.
I know, it always is, isn't it?
Literally, why are we not surprised? But who is MIA? You say like pop culture icon. I don't know who MIA is.
You do know, you know the song she sings. It goes, "Live fast, die young, bad girls do it well."
Yeah.
Live, that song. I feel like I'm always singing on this podcast.
You literally are, and I love it. I don't know, I'm a bit curious though. Like, I want to know more about the actual microchips, right? Like, what do people think about what the purpose of them was, I guess? I mean, obviously, I know you hinted at the start, like mind control, but yeah, tell us more about them.
Well, yeah, to be quite honest with you, the more I had a look into the tech around like that time.
Oh, look at our Taz looking at the tech.
Oh, I know, look at me.
Taking my
She's
spot.
not just the science girly anymore. But anyway, yeah, I came across a number of different articles, one of which I remember well was the shortage of microchips during the pandemic. I don't know if you remember this. It was around like May 2021, but basically it affected car manufacturers. So there was like a shortage of cars because there was a shortage of microchips. So car manufacturers worldwide were basically forced to halt their production due to a semiconductor shortage, which basically consists of microchips. And they typically do like the brain power in modern vehicles and electronics like phones. Now, why was this? And people say that it was a direct impact of the pandemic. Some say it's because the government were literally using the chips in the vaccine, so there was a shortage. And others said it was due to the increased demand as we bought like more computers and electronics to work and study from home, which obviously makes more logical sense to me. But not only that, but we do have good microchip technology, right? IBM announced in 2021. I find it all a little bit suspicious, if I'm going to be a conspiracy theorist, that is literally all around 2021. So yeah, that's a bit weird. But they announced in 2021 that they had created the smallest, which is about 2 nanometers, and the most powerful microchip, and contains 50 billion transistors, which I'm not even really going to pretend to know what that is. But I just thought it was impressive that I had 50 billion. Anyway, each transistor is about the size of 5 atoms or 2 DNA strands, and it's expected to be 45% more powerful and use 75% less energy than today's most advanced 7 nanometer chips, and pave way for improved capabilities for AI and cloud computing. And in the same year, and this is where I was like, oh, there were some scientists at Columbia University, and they announced that their researchers had developed a tiny microchip capable of measuring vital signs like temperature, and it had been designed to be small enough, about the size of a grain of sand, to be injected. Now, this was the first instance of a small implantable device that allowed bi-directional communication to and from the microchip as well. So not only was it the smallest injectable, but also allows a bi-directional communication, which hadn't been done before.
Interesting. I'm actually surprised that there is like some fishy stuff. Can't lie. Like, there's actually some stuff that's like a bit coincidental. I wasn't expecting you to, especially you, I wasn't expecting you to bring anything. However, I will say I think this is very good evidence that we are very two-sided on this podcast. When we say we're going to bring you both sides, we always do. Because if Taz is bringing you stuff supporting this theory, then you know we're telling the truth. But I don't know, like, how do you know much about like how this bidirectional communication actually occurs? Because surely that's like a really big key part in this conspiracy theory, if we know that.
Yeah, and I think like how would they power the chip as well? Like, is not, if there's this bidirectional communication, it has to like store data, it has to communicate out. So obviously if we think of our phones can communicate and charge wirelessly, right? And so the microchip would ideally need to do that as well. That is power wirelessly and send and receive data wirelessly. So our phones work by using electromagnetic waves, or radio frequency to be specific, and these waves are basically centimeters in size. So using these type of waves is actually impractical and near impossible to use when trying to target something as small as 300 microns, which is like 0.3 of a millimeter, and that was the size of these microchips. So instead, ultrasound was used, which is like sound wavelengths, and they can be fractions of a millimeter in size. So obviously this is like way more practical in sending and receiving data from these microchips, because the wavelengths are small enough to target the microchip in situ. So yeah, and then this is obviously where the 5G argument came in, because at the same time 5G came around, and 5G's wavelengths are a lot smaller than standard electromagnetic waves that we used prior to that. And this is the technology that conspiracy theorists believed could read the microchips. So that's kind of like how 5G linked into microchips in vaccines as well, which I didn't actually really know. You kind of just don't really. I just didn't really entertain it at the time, but I was like, oh, this is actually really interesting that people put two and two together in that way.
I actually was literally about to say the exact same thing. Like, I never understood how and like where people get this idea about 5G from.
Yeah,
but I think you're right. Like, do you know what, like, conspiracy theorists, they're kind of clever.
Yeah, I think they're quite clever in the sense that, like, some people have written a very convincing argument for 5G and that it can potentially target these microchips, because previous versions of the electromagnetic waves that we use were centimeters in size, blah, 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 you know? And then obviously people who don't have that level of comprehension just take that and run with it and spread it and whatever. But it does take some people initially to be like, oh, you know, this works out and this relates to this. Obviously they don't know enough of the science in order to determine whether it is possible or not, because I'll go on to that later. But it's very interesting that they mentally make that link.
They would make great detectives. Do you know what I mean? Like, good at piecing information together.
Yeah, and I think one thing I've learned throughout this series is that when you start adding all these factors up, it really does build into a big conspiracy. But that's like how conspiracies work, right? So they just find more and more unrelated topics that kind of fit the narrative. So let's start debunking some of this. And can I just say, when I was doing my research for this, and anytime I do research for these topics, I don't know about you, Liv, but I fully get immersed in it. I was even listening to the papers in the lab whilst I was doing lab work. I was that immersed in it.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I'm literally the same whenever I'm doing research for an episode, but my thing is I love listening while I'm like cooking dinner, or also while I'm in the bath. I have a thing where every Sunday I get in the bath and like I listen to something to help me with like research for that week's episode, and it's like my routine now. But I mean, you listening to papers in the lab, like, Firstly, multitasking queen over here, because I don't think I can do that. But also, Taz, we can't be having these conversations about letting our listeners in on like what we're actually using to listen to these papers, because I feel like our listeners, like if they're listening to us, they're listening to this podcast, right? They like listening to science. So maybe we should tell them about what we're using.
Yeah, so the sponsors of today's episode is Audemic, and it's an online tool that helps you discover, comprehend, and obviously stay on top of papers. And so with Audemic Scholar, you can turn dense academic papers into easy to digest audio, letting you listen while driving, exercise, or obviously in the lab like me. And it's tailored to anyone, especially those who might struggle to read those dense scientific manuscripts. Yeah, aka us. And I think because of this, it definitely makes reading manuscripts more accessible as well.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but I feel like so many papers in my field are like so long. Like they're actually like 30 pages long as well. So number one, I can't be bothered to read them. But also even listening to them sometimes, I'm like, come on, can we speed this up? So what I love about Audemic is that it has like a playback feature where you can actually change the playback speed. So if any of our listeners want to give it a try, Audemic offers a free 7-day trial, so you can test it out before committing to a plan. And we also have a discount code which we will pop on screen now, which will get you some money off. But of course we will pop the link to Audemic in today's episode description, and you guys will definitely have to let us know where you're listening from. Is it the bath or is it the lab? But for now, let's get back into debunking microchips in vaccines.
Okay, so I want to touch on the microchip technology first. So the 2 nanometer IBM chip was worked on for 4 years before its release. Obviously, way before COVID-19 was even a thing, and it's not the sort of chip that is injectable into humans either. It's a chip used within the interfaces of computers, so not a wireless connection, nor is it biologically relevant in this case, which leads me on to the injectable microchip. So whilst this technology seems pretty legit, and I will admit that, like it's literally been made to be injectable, it wasn't developed until mid-2021, at least half a year after the first person was vaccinated. But not only that, the technology is still in its very early stages. So at the time of release, it had only been shown to be capable of recording temperature, something that is very well established in many implantable devices already. So if you have a pet, you could actually get like injectable microchips that measure the temperature as well as their sort of microchip ID number. So that's a possibility. And it would also have limited stability in the body, as the chip didn't survive longer than 21 days in water. And so far, it has never been tested on any humans. Then we have the logistics behind powering the chip, because it can only be powered by ultrasound since the devices are so small that even 5G, which is referred to as the millimeter band or the millimeter wave, still produces a wave that is too big to work. So unless we walked around with ultrasound devices capable of reading and charging the chip at close proximity, this hidden surveillance wouldn't work. Now, if this technology was invented a decade prior, I would imagine we'd probably have the technology to do this, but the timelines just simply don't add up. And also, to add logic to the mix, why would scientists come out about this in the midst of a pandemic where this is already kind of a conspiracy theory, if not to just report their findings?
Yeah, I agree, because essentially the scientists would literally just be like telling on themselves. And I know conspiracy theories kind of like that idea a little bit more, because sometimes they like to then accuse the scientists of like teasing the conspiracy theory almost in a way. But all I'm thinking as I'm listening to you is surely there's some type of like quality control system in place, like globally for the vaccines, right? And also I'm thinking politically, it literally wouldn't make sense for a German manufacturer of the vaccines to put chips in vaccines to carry out surveillance in the USA. Do you know what I mean? And also, like, surely the USA would literally not like allow that if they knew about it.
Yeah, exactly. And that leads me onto something that is shared among conspiracy theories, which is like a joint agenda. So many people and organizations globally would have to be involved for this to actually work and for this to actually be a legit thing. So the vaccines were individually tested and approved by agencies like the CDC, the WHO, the FDA, and the EMA. And the vaccine formulas are public knowledge and reviewed by independent scientists worldwide. Not only that, but millions of doses have been administered and subsequently studied. So if microchips existed, scientists would have definitely found them by now. Like, you got to think about MRI machines or x-rays. There would be some reports of adverse or weird events, and there haven't been any in relation to microchips. So there's no evidence for institutions ever talking about microchips in vaccines. And even if we think back to Bill Gates, where the rumor originated, he only ever mentioned digital IDs like the one in your passport that you use at the border control gates for the purposes of just tracking vaccine status and nothing implantable.
Yeah, I agree. I think logistically it literally doesn't make any sense at all. And I think it's interesting as well that you say that we already have like versions of digital ID, like our passports. But also at the very start of this episode, and like my whole thoughts on this whole theory is that surely there's literally no advantage over microchips in vaccines when we literally all have like our phones that literally just have like so much data on us that it's probably way more interesting for governments than like what they could collect through a microchip.
Yeah, 100%. And this is the thing, right? I think this all comes down to education, not only on like the science side and how science needs to be communicated better, but people don't actually know what's in the vaccine. So we'll get onto that later. But people also don't realize the extent of what data is collected from us through the different devices we have, whether it's our phones, laptops, smartwatches, smart speakers. And the examples of the data that can be collected is like your personal information, so your name, phone number, email address, contact details. You've got location data, so your GPS coordinates, cell tower information, Wi-Fi hotspot data that can pinpoint your location with very like significant accuracy. Then you've got communication data, so your call logs, your like the numbers that you've dialed, call duration, time and date, text messages, the entire contents, the recipients, their names. You've got internet activity, so your browsing history, search queries, websites. Obviously I feel like people know this through
True crime. True crime.
Exactly. 100%. And then you've got your app usage data, so the apps that you've used, the time spent on each app. When you think about like really specific apps, I don't know about you, Liv, but I have a period tracking app. That data is saved, right? So
I don't have one yet, but I was thinking about downloading one, but maybe now I'm like, no.
Oh, I'm just like, all our data is shared at this point. Like, who cares if they know when my period is? But I think it's potential issue for people in the US, where in some states abortion is banned, because if they're like tracking their period on a tracker app and they're taken to court for having an abortion, they can use that as evidence.
Oh my gosh.
Because obviously they would stop tracking their period, right? So
surely there's like some privacy. Well, I guess not.
No, none of this stuff is private, and this is the problem, right? Is because a lot of the apps, you sign terms and conditions. No one ever reads that. No one ever reads those terms and conditions.
Just adding to this, there's like this whole huge thing at the moment about how Apple have always protected your data, but now Apple like are no longer doing that. So Apple are now giving over like way more data than they ever have, which is interesting.
I didn't know that. That's really interesting.
I don't know the ins and outs of it, but yes, there's something about how Apple have been really good at protecting a lot of our data, and now they're no longer going to be doing that.
Oh,
yeah.
Awkward. Yeah, so we didn't need microchips, but that's just a few. There's other data like sensor data, so movement, rotation, your microphone sounds, even like it has a barometer in there, so like the pressure that you're experiencing. And then you've got biometric data as well, which I think is like probably the scariest in my opinion, and obviously more of a reason for not needing microchips, because obviously you've got your fingerprints, you've got facial recognition scan, you've got movement and activity like steps taken, distance traveled, pace, activity type, calories burned, even your heart health, so your heart rate, resting heart rate, and like your heart rate variability. So that really taps into your health. You've got sleep monitoring, duration, stages of sleep. And then obviously that ties in again with location tracking. If you're exercising, you're going for a run and you use your watch to like track that run. And then you've also got physiological data, so skin temperature, blood oxygen saturation, and apps. I don't know if people realize, but apps request permissions to have access to this data for the purposes of like the use of the app, obviously, but they can also use this as ways for advertisement, and everyone just accepts the terms and conditions, like I said. So once they have that data, they can pass it on. And honestly, the conspiracy theorist in me believes that this is why TikTok was kind of demonized by the US government, because it's owned by a Chinese company called ByteDance, and the US obviously didn't want users' data being made available to China. And obviously all other big social media platforms are US owned. And there's actually an agreement between Britain, the US, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada known as the Five Eyes Alliance, where basically intelligence is shared and made available across these 5 countries. And that was forged actually after World War II. And essentially the data made available to China through TikTok is not what obviously the Western countries want to share. And to be honest, neither do the users, but obviously we don't have any say in that. But I guess my point still stands. Why do we need a microchip if all of this data is available to the government's disposal anyway? And the short answer is we don't, because governments and companies can already collect the data without needing to inject a chip. There's no need for like an elaborate, expensive conspiracy when people willingly share their data online every single day.
Honestly, I couldn't have said it better. And let me just say one other thing on like when you were saying about things like how much exercise you do, how many calories you burn. Do you know what I always think about? And I think about this a lot because I'm an epigeneticist. I think about this a lot because in the US, obviously you have like health insurance, and I always wonder what happens if and when insurance companies get a hold of that data. Could they then increase your insurance premiums because you're not exercising enough? Or could they decline like or deny insurance to you because they see that you don't exercise, or maybe
you don't have like an active lifestyle, things like that. Yeah, I think that's so true, because obviously when you're applying for health insurance, they ask you things like, are you a smoker? How many units of alcohol do you drink? Things like that. And obviously that affects your health insurance premiums and things like that. So if they had all this other health data that you're mentioning, it obviously could affect that as well. That's really true. I mean, we're really talking like true conspiracy theorists now, but obviously because we don't know.
I don't think this is out of the realms of possibility that absolutely like this data could be sold one day to people who want to buy it, and insurance companies will be the first people who want to buy it.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's that crazy conspiracy theory. Like, we already know this data is being collected. The next step is literally just it being made available to these companies. So yeah, I don't know. It is all very interesting. I do want to make sure that we cover, and like maybe we can finish off with this, but because I feel like you obviously know it best, and I actually don't know too much about this. So we've covered like what isn't in the vaccines, but maybe let's cover like what is in the vaccine. So can you tell us a little bit about what the vaccines are actually made up of and how they actually work?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk specifically about the mRNA vaccines, because these are the ones that we are still using today for the SARS-CoV-2 vaccines, and they were fairly novel vaccine technology for use at a scale as large as the COVID-19 pandemic. So the main component is messenger RNA, or mRNA for short, and the mRNA in the vaccine encodes for the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein. So that is the protein on the surface of the virus that allows entry into the cell. Okay, and this mRNA is synthetically designed to mimic the genetic sequence for the spike protein. And the reason that we want to make this protein is because that's what we want to target against. Because if our antibodies bind this spike protein, it means that any virus that enters then can't enter our cells for a full infection. And just to be clear, the mRNA only encodes the spike protein and literally no other part of the virus. So it would never lead to like a fully fledged infection, which was another conspiracy theory at the beginning of the pandemic, that the vaccine were like causing SARS-CoV-2 infections. So it was literally physically impossible to do that. And so this mRNA was then packaged into lipid nanoparticles, or people call them LNPs for short. And these nanoparticles are made up of the same components found in the cell membrane of our cells. So if you think about a cell, all the contents is packaged by a cell membrane, and that's basically what the lipid nanoparticles are made of, just like smaller, essentially. And the only purpose for that is that it protects the really fragile mRNA, and it also facilitates entry into human cells, because basically it just like bulges next to the cell membrane and then it's just sort of engulfed by the cell and then allows delivery into the cell. And these are made up of lipids. So you're probably familiar with like the cell membrane being made up of lipids. Obviously lipid nanoparticles are also made of lipids because they're made of the same thing. And there's 4 key lipids in the vaccine. You've got ionizable lipid, which binds to and stabilizes the mRNA, which allows for effective delivery into the cell. You've got phospholipid, which basically helps form the lipid bilayer structure of the nanoparticles, which is kind of what I'm talking about when I relate it to the cell membrane. And then you've got cholesterol, which provides stability and structural integrity. And then you've got pegylated lipid, which basically prevents the nanoparticles from being rapidly broken down in the bloodstream. And then inside the vaccine, you've got other components. So you've got salts and buffering agents, so like sodium chloride, which is your standard salt, potassium chloride, sodium phosphate, and that basically maintains the acidity or the pH stability of the vaccine. And then you've got sugars like sucrose, which protects the nanoparticles from degradation when it's being stored. And then you've got water for like the literal injection. So how do the vaccines work? So the vaccine is injected intramuscularly, and then the lipid nanoparticles that protect the mRNA will help it enter muscle cells or any kind of like antigen presenting cells as part of your immune system, such as dendritic cells. And then these lipid nanoparticles would fuse with the cell membrane, releasing the mRNA into the cytoplasm of the cell. And another conspiracy theory off the back of the vaccine, I feel like there were so many different conspiracies for whatever reason, was that it mutates our DNA. Now, this wasn't the case because mRNA cannot enter the nucleus, which is where our DNA is. And it has to have like a specific sequence for it to be targeted and integrated into host DNA. And in this case, it wasn't, because it doesn't need to. And actually, it's more efficient being in the cytoplasm because it's rapidly translated into the spike protein. Like, there's no reason for it to go into the DNA, integrate into the DNA, and then come back out again, because that's essentially what it would have to do in order to produce an immune response. So yeah, didn't do that. But like I said, host ribosomes in the cell recognize the mRNA and then translate it into the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein, and then it's transported to the cell membrane where it's displayed on the cell surface. And then any kind of immune cell that comes along, so dendritic cells or like T cells or macrophages, will then present the antigen on its surface, and it then spirals into an immune response which produces antibodies, and then that gives you the protection. So that's essentially how it works. And after the mRNA is transcribed into protein, like any mRNA, it's rapidly degraded. So that is how it works. So clever.
I literally don't get vaccines, but I don't think I've ever explained vaccines as much as I do right now. Because it always confuses me, and always like the T cells, the B cells, I don't know how you remember it. Like, I just forget it all the time. Like, how does that stay in your brain? I mean, I guess you are literally a virologist. by training, so like you definitely should remember these things, but I don't know, it just confuses me. But that was a great explanation. Thanks so much for this episode, Taz. That was so interesting, and I'm so glad you did this episode. But also, you knew that I was not going to let us get through this series without you doing this episode, because I've been excited for it. So yeah, that was so good. And for our listeners, as always, we will of course be popping a poll on our Instagram story this week, so make sure you're following us on Instagram at So Cultured Podcast if you want to take part in that, and let us know your thoughts on today's episode. And for now, let's get on to the laboratory section of today's episode, because our inbox has been flowing and I have a hilarious story to share with you today. Okay, the subject line of today's email is, my research group tried to recruit me into their pyramid scheme.
What?
I thought I was signing up for cutting edge research. Turns out I have accidentally joined a business opportunity. So I'm in my first year of my PhD, and I recently joined a lab that's well funded, well respected, and according to my supervisor, the best place to launch my career. But after a few months, I noticed something weird. A lot of the senior students and postdocs kept bringing up this side hustle that they were involved in. They said it was, quotes, easy money and a great way to build financial security in academia. So I assumed it was a normal tutoring gig or maybe some teaching work, but nope. It was a full-on MLM. Now, for any of our listeners who don't know what an MLM is, and I find this hilarious because I love watching MLM videos on YouTube. MLM stands for multi-level marketing, and it's basically like, do you remember Avon back in the day when like, all of our mums sold Avon? With the little brochures, or like you'd have your neighborhood Avon lady. That's like an MLM. Someone who used to bully you in school, and then they're like, hey babe, how are you, like got this thing, and they like try and sell you something. That's an MLM. It carries on. They were selling some kind of wellness supplement. Of course they was. Is it always a wellness supplement? And apparently my supervisor had been investing in it for years. The worst part, question mark, they weren't even being subtle about recruiting me. I got invited to multiple networking events that turned out to be sales pitches, and one postdoc even told me that real financial success in academia comes from knowing how to monetize your connections. I had to physically escape one of these meetings by pretending I had a lab emergency. Now I'm avoiding all of them, but they keep subtly pressuring me to reconsider. If I speak up, I might tank my academic career before it even starts. But if I stay quiet, I'll be dodging sales pitches for the next 4 years. Help. What the hell is going on?
Gosh.
This is a
Do
new
you know
one.
what? I find this so interesting because I obviously have like science account, right? Outside of the podcast account. But the amount of wellness brands that come to me and say, like, obviously you're a scientist, can you endorse this product and say that it works and things like that? And I'm like, what? Like, I know that's just so you can claim that it's approved by scientists on your
100%.
on your advertising.
So that's actually a really interesting point, because she said that her supervisor has been investing in this product for years. So like this could totally be it, that now he's like got all of his lab group to start endorsing it and like got them all involved in the MLM so that they can sell more products, because then people are like, oh, well, a scientist is telling me to use it. Oh my God, that's such a good point.
Yeah.
That is such a good, and that's why because why else has he got all of his lab group involved in it? I mean, obviously the way that an MLM works is that, say I recruit you, the listener, and Taz, like I recruit both of you guys to be a part of my MLM. Whatever you guys sell, I then make a commission off of it. So like the higher up in the pyramid, that's why it's called a pyramid scheme. The higher up in the pyramid you are, the more money you make. So it does make sense, like in that sense, that he would get all of his, like just as many people involved as possible. But then, yeah, maybe he's trying to get it to like look like it's endorsed by scientists. Oh my God, this is actually insane. I think MLMs are like the funniest thing ever because nobody makes money on them. Like literally people just lose money. Like, if you actually look at the like stats from most like MLMs, literally 99% of people lose their money.
Yeah.
And
because they buy loads of stuff and then try and sell it on and then it never works.
Because they never sell it, and then they've just got a load of like random dupe
Gummies.
perfumes sat in there. You gummies.
Yeah, I think this is really interesting as well because it's something that I've thought about myself, because at the moment I'm working on microbiome stuff and I'm looking at how we can supplement the gut bacteria to reduce inflammation in the body, specifically in diseases like lung diseases, long COVID, asthma, things like that. But I've been doing some studies and like some specific supplements have been really beneficial, and I'm like, should I invest in this before I publish these findings?
Oh my God, yeah, 100%.
Or should I just start selling these supplements and be like, here's my paper to prove that it works?
Oh my God, you could start your own academic MLM.
I know. Should I just do it?
This is absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, I know. Maybe it was me. Maybe I'm the supervisor.
Yeah, literally. You are the supervisor. She is your student. Oh my God, this is hilarious. Okay, so she is being harassed by everyone who wants her to take part in this MLM. What should she do? Should she say anything?
Oh my gosh.
I mean, I would just say, like, I'm not taking part in your MLM. Like, leave me alone, to be honest. Or is that really harsh?
Yeah,
like,
I also think, like, surely maybe people don't. I feel like a lot of the time people who are in MLMs don't realise that they're in an MLM and they won't get money out of it.
Because we all know someone who's been in an MLM, like 100%.
Yes.
And you're literally looking at them like you're in an MLM, but they literally think they're like a business babe.
Yeah. Yeah. So
like,
I think like
you're
maybe,
literally losing money.
Yeah, I'm like, maybe she should go to these people and are like, do you realise that you're in an MLM? Because that is the case.
See, that's exactly what I would do. I would just be like, I'm not taking part in the MLM. Like, do you realise that you're in an MLM? Because I would sit them down and I'd be like, listen, tell me how much money you've actually made. Because have you actually made any money? That's what I would do. I'd be like, okay, I say, I'm really interested in joining. Like, yeah, interested, want to hear more. And then I'd be like, let's see some figures. Let me see what actually, like, how much you make, what goes on, what work you have to put in. Yeah, I'd entertain it for a bit, I'm not gonna lie, but then I'd just be like, do you know what, I'm not interested. And I think you just got to be solid, like every single time they bring it up to you, no, I'm not interested. And then eventually surely they get bored of bringing it up to you. But if you're being polite about it, they're going to continue because they want you under them, because then they make money off of you.
Yeah, it's like those telemarketing calls that you get. Just be like, I'm not interested, don't contact me again about this, babe.
Yeah, and then she goes to the next lab meeting and they're all just talking about this fucking wellness supplement.
Honestly,
I wonder if they take it themselves.
Yeah. I wonder what it is.
Yeah, like what does it do? Is it for like, well, like, is it like hair gummies, or it's just like it's like a wellness supplement? That could be a range of things.
Anything, yeah.
That's so interesting. This is actually hilarious. This is like,
I've never heard of that before. That's crazy.
An academic MLM. Who would have thought we'd be here? We are in a parallel world right now. But yeah, basically, I think don't overthink it. Just tell them. Definitely play along with it for a bit of fun. But then just tell them, look, I'm not interested. Stop asking me about it. And every time I'd just be like, stop. I'm not being part of your MLM. I'm against MLMs.
Yeah, I agree.
That's what I would say.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, this is an interesting story. I wasn't expecting to read something like this today. Love these interesting stories. To be fair, I have had a little sneak peek at our inbox and we do have some interesting stories coming up. I'm not going to lie.
Oh my God, I'm really excited to hear them. And obviously, if you're listening and you're like, oh, I've got a fun story, like a story, big or small, we actually do cover them all. So we always leave an anonymous link in our description. So please send them over. And also, we love hearing your feedback or what advice you would give our listeners. So always put a comment below about what you would do in this scenario or any advice that you could give.
On this really quickly, I'm just going to note this one laboraTEAAA that we did where you and me were just like joking around, having fun. And then all of our listeners had commented on the reel and they were like, you know which one I'm talking about, don't you?
Yeah.
All of our listeners commented on the reel and they were like, this guy's a red flag, leave this guy. And like you and me just didn't even say that at all. And I was like, is that a sign that me and Taz are just like really toxic or we're just like absolute ruined, naive individuals? Because I was like, when I read all the comments, I was like, yeah, why didn't we think of that?
We just ignored all the red flags, didn't we?
We actually did. So basically, more of the story is we need you guys to give your input as well. So yeah. And so with that rounds off episode 6 of Debunked by the So Cultured podcast. Obviously, we are nearing the end of this season. As we've just said, we would also love to hear your thoughts on what you think of this season so far. And also, here is your reminder that leaving us a comment, leaving us a like, a rating, a review on whatever platform you listen to us on is such a massive help for us. And a lot of work goes into these episodes behind the scenes. So if you are enjoying them, please do consider leaving us a rating, a review, or even just a comment in the comment section. We would appreciate it so much. And with that, we will see you guys in next week's episode of Debunked. Bye, everyone.
Bye.